Today we'll be doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to be reviewing any particular watch, but instead showing you how to make the most of a type of watch you might already own, the dive watch. Now, I've often said that I think the timing bezel on dive watches is one of the most useful complications. So in this video, I'll be showing you the many ways that you can actually use it in your everyday life. Now, when I say that, I don't mean how to use it for actual diving purposes. I am not a diver, and I'm sure there are lots of other videos on YouTube that show you exactly how to use that for actual diving purposes. No, I'll be showing you how to use it for everyday life. Now, the rotating timing bezel has an interesting history because it was, of course, first used in wristwatches for pilots to help them with aerial navigation in the late 20s and 30s, and was then used in dive watches in the 50s. And of course, now they're just a popular style that has its uses in everyday life, as we're about to find out. I'm using the Longines Hydro Conquest to illustrate the concepts, but of course, anything I say in this video will apply to any dive watch you might have. So whether you have a Seiko, a Citizen, an Omega, a Rolex, a Mito, a Satina, a Longines, it'll work with all dive watches. So we'll be looking at three main modes, right? So three main ways of using the timing bezel: time-elapsed, countdown timer, and hours elapsed. Let's start with time-elapsed mode. Now, this is the most basic way of using the timing bezel and really what the watch was actually designed for. It's very, very simple, right? Imagine you need to time 10 minutes. Imagine you're making pasta and you need to time 10 minutes so that the spaghetti you're cooking is perfectly al dente, right? What you would do, and you'll notice I've stopped the watch so I can simulate time passing. What I would do is, imagine this is current time. I put the spaghetti in salted water. At that point, what I would do is I would move this pip, that little triangle there, and align it with my minute hand, right? Now, at this point, what I've done is I've started counting the number of minutes that have passed from that time. So as time passes slowly, like so, I know that if I need to cook this for 10 minutes, I'm about halfway there. 5 minutes have passed, right? I'm now reading my bezel for how much time has passed. And once the minute hand gets to 10, I know I need to take my pasta out of the water and perhaps move it to a pan with a sauce. So that's very, very simple, right? You just align it with the pip and then you can tell how many minutes have passed. So this is sort of how you'd use a stopwatch as well, right? Except you have a bit of an advantage. Now imagine you wanted to time 10 minutes, but after you put the pasta, you forgot for the first minute to actually start the timer. Now with a stopwatch, you then have to sort of calculate and say, okay, now I've got 9 minutes. Not with a timing bezel. Because what you can do is, again, imagine I put the pasta in now. What I can do is I can back time it, right? This is what it would be in normal circumstances, but I can place it a minute earlier to sort of give it that extra minute that's already passed. So now you're still timing up to 10 minutes, but you sort of included that first minute that you forgot, which I find quite useful. The second way to use your timing bezel is in countdown timer mode. Now, it's very much the same as time-elapsed, except you're just inverting it. So in this mode, if you want to count down to 10 minutes, instead of aligning the pip to where the minute hand is right now, I would align it with where it will be in 10 minutes. So for example, I put my spaghetti in like before, and I put the pip there, right? Now, I know that when the minute hands will have reached that little triangle, 10 minutes will have passed. So really, I'm doing the same thing, except I'm now going to count down to that. And this is useful if you want to have a sort of marker, visual marker, for when you need to do something. So in this case, remove the pasta from the water. So that's countdown timer mode. I find that extremely useful in both modes, but I tend to use it mostly in time-elapsed mode. And I should mention that although most dive watches have a time-elapsed bezel that sort of counts up like this, 10, 15, 20, there are watches like the Zin 104 that actually have a countdown timer for to make it easier to count down to a certain point, because some people prefer that. If you have a fixed time. Like for example, if you're flying, you might say, okay, I need to make a certain turn, or I need to check my fuel tanks, switch fuel tanks in 10 minutes. It's easier to set those 10 minutes up that way. The final mode we're going to talk about is hours elapsed. And this is also very, very simple because whilst you normally tend to use a watch like this to count the minutes elapsed from a certain point, you could actually use it to time the number of hours elapsed, right? So to do that, instead of aligning the pip with where the minute hand is, you simply align it to where the hour hand is, right? Like so. And at this point, imagine that, I mean, this is very useful if you're taking a flight that, say, that's a 5-hour flight. So you just want to know where in that flight you are. So imagine you get on the flight, it takes off, and you align the bezel with the hour hand. And then you fall asleep. You know, you wake up at some point in the flight and you see the time, the current time is this. All you need to do now is compare where the hour hand is at the moment with where you started measuring from. And you can sort of tell that a little more than an hour has passed, maybe an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes or so. And again, as time passes, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, you're sort of not looking at the bezel at this point. You're just comparing it to the actual hour markers in the dial. Since you start timing there, it's 1, 2, 3, and maybe another 30 minutes have passed, right? So 3 hours and 20 minutes have passed. And of course, once you reach that point, you know that about 5 hours have passed. You should be arriving very, very soon indeed. There's another way you can use it, because in many ways, the timing bezel, all it is a marker. It's like a bookmark, right? Use a bookmark to keep track of where you are in a book. In the same way, you can use the pip as a marker in time, in the past, in the present, or in the future. I'll give you an example, right? Imagine it's 11:15. You need to be somewhere at 2 o'clock, right? And you know that it takes you 45 minutes to get there, right? So what you can do is you can align 45 with 2 o'clock, like so. And the pip is now showing you what time you need to leave the apartments. So the very latest time you need to leave the apartment so that you can make it on time for that appointment of yours. I mean, it's very basic, but it's very useful, right? Just to have the little marker so that you don't have to constantly think about when your departure time should be. That's telling you that you have a maximum of 10 minutes before you leave. I think that being able to mark a certain point in time is very, very useful. And there are even dive watches that don't have any numbers that simply have a pip, like the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bund, designed for the Bundeswehr, the German army, that doesn't have any markings because they normally use it to time hours and they use it as a marker. Now, you might have noticed that most diving bezels will only move in one direction, counterclockwise. Now, there are diving bezels that move both directions, but most of them will only move in one direction. And the reason is that it's a safety feature, right? We have to go back to sort of the diving world. Divers tend to use the time-elapsed mode. They use it to track bottom time because that then determines their decompression needs. So imagine that they start sort of timing from here. They know that they can only spend about 10 minutes underwater. The thing is, if you accidentally knock the bezel, because it only moves in one direction, your watch might show that more time has elapsed than it really has, but it will never show that less time has elapsed than it really has, because that could be very dangerous if your watch tells you that you have only been underwater for 5 minutes, but really it's already been 7, right? So that's the reason. But there are other varieties of bezels. There are, for example, bezels with a locking mechanism. The Yama Superman or the Squalid Tiger are good examples. There are also dive watches with an internal bezel that you use a second crown, like in the Longines Legend Diver. We talked about the countdown specific bezel with the Zin 104, or dive watches with no markings at all, like the Blancpain Bund. And of course, there are some that have both minutes and hours marked, like the Doxa or the Serica. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, do subscribe to the channel. I will be producing a lot more videos about watches, about complications, and about watch history. I will also be doing a comparison between this Longines and the Certina DS Action, and I'm also working on another video on a German brand that makes brilliant Bauhaus and Fliegeruhr or pilot watches. So all that is to come. Stay tuned, and I hope you have a lovely day.